And so in the 16th century, when Martin Luther was summoned to this imperial diet, known as the Diet of Augsburg, where they would have a bunch of princes and noblemen meet to, number one, sell indulgences to fund a crusade against the advancing Turks at the time. But they also at this moment were dealing with Luther, who had just posted his 95 Theses to the castle's door at Wittenberg. And Luther was nervous when he got the summons because he knew what had happened to Huss and he knew what happened to Wycliffe. But he did say that he was going to go to this diet at Augsburg, and whether he lived or whether he died, he knew it was going to be God's will. The collection of theses that Luther had presented was against the Catholic Church, specifically in their practice of indulgence, which spoke specifically to their authority on Scripture. And this action kicks off a firestorm known as the Protestant Reformation. And when the dust settled, after all of this, the church as we know it would never be the same. And it wasn't the same because of the way that men like Calvin, men like Luther, men like Zwingli viewed the Scriptures. Luther and Calvin were not ignorant men. Calvin was a lawyer from Geneva. Martin Luther held a doctorate of theology and taught at the College of Wittenberg. And Luther defended the right of private judgment, and he emphasized the necessity of taking context and historical circumstances into account. He demanded that faith and spiritual insight be in the interpreter, and he desired to find Christ everywhere in Scripture. Calvin himself believed that the first business of interpretation when it came to the Scriptures was to let the author say what he does say, instead of attributing to him what we think he ought to say, which is something we're going to talk about tonight. But both of these men, and it became a prevailing theme throughout the Protestant Reformation, believed that Scripture should be available to all men, not just the nobles and not just the select few who ran churches. But the interpretation, the Scripture should be available for use within the home. In response, the Catholic Church, because they have to respond, right? They convened what was called the Council of Trent. And they came up with three things of how to view Scripture. Number one, that the authority of the church tradition had to be maintained when it came to the authority of Scripture. That the highest authority had been ascribed to the Vulgate, which was translated by Jerome, which is what their Scriptures were founded upon. And then third, at the Council of Trent, that it's necessary to conform one's interpretation to the authority of the church and the unanimous consent of the Father. And this is why the battle for the authority of Scripture became the forefront of the Protestant Reformation. It's why men like R.C. Sproul consider this the formal or the form reason of the Reformation. The doctrine of authority of Scripture, or sola scriptura, was the formation of the premier matter of the Reformation, which was justification through faith alone.